Morning, everybody. It has just clicked over to 9:30, so I am going to make a start as there's a huge amount to fit in today. I can see people are still filtering into the room, though. I'm Chelsea Shelley. I'm Head of Member Engagement at ACCA for the UK team. So a warm welcome to everybody who's joined what today is the second part of this project management series. Just a couple of housekeeping bits before we start. If you could keep your microphones muted just for the comfort of everybody else so there's no distractions there. This is a Teams webinar, so you'll see there's a Q&A box. At any point, if you'd like to put a question in there, you can just type it in the box and we'll get to it as soon as we can when there's a break in the meeting. There's also a chat function. We do encourage you to get to know one another, share your comments, your reflections in the chat. And if anybody wants to drop their LinkedIn profile, please feel free to do so that you can connect with some of your fellow attendees this morning. I'd just now like to introduce Alan Reid, Project Director at GetSavvy. GetSavvy have partnered with ACCA to be able to deliver you these workshops. So over to you, Alan.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. Good morning, everybody. As Chelsea says, Alan Reid, Director of GetSavvy. I'm really delighted to be tackling this topic today to this particular audience of ACCA members, because the reality is that finance people do often just get pushed into the front line on technology projects, in fact, on every kind of project, whether it's doing the office move or whatever it is. So, and in particular on technology projects, people can be quite exposed, because you might feel you don't have a technology background, you don't have a project management background, but you're just put in the front line anyway. So let's go through how you can make the best of that position, how you can survive the experience and come out ahead. So just a little bit of detail. As Chelsea said, we are recording and we'll be sharing the content. So please don't worry about scribbling loads of notes, just engage with the content. The content for the webinar today is taken from our online self-paced course, which is called Managing Technology Change Projects for Business People. That course is designed for people who find themselves responsible for a project in their own organization. So it covers 9 hours of learning and every phase of a technology project, typically about 30-40 minutes per project phase in the real world, and gives you everything you need to know in order to make sure it goes well for you and bad things don't happen during your project. The ACCA have negotiated a partnership with us to offer a member benefit to ACCA members. So essentially, ACCA members will get £50 off the lift price of the course. And the course is already priced at an entry level. So it's £250 for 6 months membership with the discount that you get as an ACCA member. Essentially, as well as the career boosting qualification that you get from the course, you also get 9 hours of CPD benefit from it as well. So just briefly, one of the most common areas of feedback we get from people taking the course is, oh, I need to have my whole management team take this in order to get everyone on the same page. So there are team and organization-wide discounts, and the more course licenses you get in the classic way, the less expensive each license appears. Okay, so just really briefly, we offer project management and consultancy services and our own immersive learning platform, which is all very AI driven and very modern, very engaging and easy for people to take the training. And then just to mention that we're 100% fiercely independent of any technology or provider. So it's always about the organization having a successful project, not what technology people happen to land on. So the agenda for today, just to go through quickly, is essentially why do finance people get made responsible for technology projects, and then we talk about what you can do in that position to make sure that you have a good outcome from it. It reflects well on you and you personally and your career and your perception within the organization, and of course there's a good project outcome for the organization itself. And then we talk about the practical aspects of managing the elements of the project that you're likely to be most responsible for, things like the costs, maybe the business case, the return on investment, and then what are the real challenges of a project and how can you get the best out of those. We'll give you a quick overview of the course itself, and then wrap up in Q&A. As Chelsea also said, please do drop questions all of the way through. So for instance, if you've just been shoved into the trenches on a project and you're thinking, who else is in this position? How do I make the best of it, etc.? Just drop your chat, have a bit of a vent, and then we'll address it as part of the webinar as well. Okay, so jumping forward into the content. So why do finance people often get made responsible for technology projects? So the first thing is that technology projects tend to be seen as expensive. They tend to be seen as things that can go out of control. So you as a finance person can be seen as someone who's going to offer that oversight and the budget control. You're perceived very commonly to being analytical and problem solving. How much of that can translate into the project is just assumed, and we would say it's not always just a given. You'll of course be familiar with the organizational processes, and then the organization will hope that you will bring some discipline and risk aversion when it comes to managing costs against an agreed budget. There's also the slightly less glamorous aspect of it, which is the organization can just be seeking to save money. So they're thinking, oh, we should actually have a full-time project manager on this. I know what we'll do. We'll get Sarah from the finance team to load it onto her already busy job, and we'll save some money by doing that. And that can put Sarah from the finance team in quite an invidious position. So it's also worth mentioning that when we talk about someone from finance being responsible for the project, the most common thing is that you're not just in a kind of secretarial role. You're not just administering and tracking after the fact. What the organization is very often expecting is that you will control the cost. You'll stop the costs going up. You'll manage the scope creep and all of those things. So it is indeed quite a lot of responsibility, and can end up being quite difficult unless you take some steps to protect yourself. Okay, so there is a genuine role for finance people on technology projects. When it comes to managing the costs and the suppliers and your own internal resources, etc., here are some of the most important things that you're likely to find yourself made responsible for. So, for instance, creating the detailed budget with allocations for every part of where money could be consumed. The cash flow element tends to be beyond most people. It's something you'll be asked to do and to be accurate about and to keep updating. And then managing costs against reality as your suppliers send you surprise invoices, or this was going to cost that, now it's going to cost the other. You're expected to manage all of that and track all of that. You're expected to, as I say, manage the scope creep, where people are saying, oh, I've had a great idea, can we add this to the project? Or we forgot this during the requirements gathering. We now need to add this surprise cost to the project as well. And then you can find yourself in that position of either just waving it through and then getting in trouble later, or being the person who has to manage the process of approving and not approving the change. And then, of course, providing the financial reporting of the project, the status reporting, etc. So this is one of the reasons why within the course itself, we provide a whole bunch of templates. So pretty much everything on there's a template that's designed to support that work, to make it easy for budget forecasting, budget tracking, laying out where your money is going. But it's on you to have the discipline to be able to follow all of those financial processes, and always be looking ahead on the money side. Quite often the finance person is not just made an adjunct to the project or having a role on the project. They can be made the project manager as well. So it's worth just talking a little bit about what the role of the project manager involves on a technology change project in your own organization. So there'll be a demand on you to plan, organize, and monitor all of your resources, which can be internal and external. Some of the most challenging parts for most project managers are building the project team, because it's all usually made up of busy people who would rather the project went away, and you're trying to get the best out of that group of people and add extra work to their roles. reporting on projects is a crucial thing that is also very time consuming. So that's where your vital project documents come in handy and fulfill a crucial role. And then, of course, that combination of the business skills, the problem solving skills, and the people skills are all required for you to be a success on your project. So I'm going to invite you to comment, if I may, Chelsea, just bring you in here in a second. But it's also worth mentioning to the people on the webinar that as the project manager on your project, or even someone who's managing the financial side of your technology change project, you have to be aware of every stage of the project that you're going to have to go through. So the course goes through every one of these stages with, as I say, a 35-40-minute module on each. So that starts with the conceptualization and the business case, goes down to the bottom left here on planning and resourcing in your own project, and so on through choosing a supplier, what can go right and wrong there, and then implementation and so on. And so many people just think, oh, once I've chosen a supplier, it's over to them and I can just relax. And of course, the opposite is true. But Chelsea, could I just ask for your comments on that propensity of organizations to bring the finance person into the project team and kind of make them responsible for all aspects of the project, or many aspects of the project? Is that something you've seen on the various projects you've been involved in?
It is. I think often projects can't get started unless you know how much money you've got to spend. And so the first port of call tends to be knocking on the finance office door and looking at that budget and trying to understand that. Whether they should then be lumbered with the entire project and the success of that or not is another matter. But often, yes, it happens. Actually, I just saw a comment in the chat from Amy. I think it's reassuring to hear that people who work in finance are being included on project teams. I think you absolutely have to include them in project teams, and they will bring skills beyond just the budget to that team. So it's hugely important. But yeah, I think there's definitely in businesses where they're undertaking projects, they will find someone within the business, usually within finance, who can oversee that, because that feels better than the alternative of having a dedicated project manager.
Yes, and of course you're engaging with your members all of the time. Have you found that people have found themselves in quite an exposed position in that? You know, because quite often the organization will say you're going to be responsible for this stuff, not quite explaining what's going on, and certainly not offering any particular training or support to do that. So have you found that members have been exposed when they've found themselves in that role?
I think, yes, to a certain extent. A lot of our members will be undertaking technology change projects likely related to the financial systems that they're using. And so obviously you want them involved in that from their own finance experience of managing the budget, but their own knowledge of the system and the business and what that system needs. But yeah, you know, I think when you're leading any project or everyone's looking at you for delivering a major change, that is exposing regardless of your skills, because it, you know, companies putting a lot of money into a huge change project, that, you know, of course it's exposing.
Absolutely. And some of these projects, you're absolutely right, some of them are for the finance team themselves, that's a vital function, but a lot of these projects are also organization wide and can be nothing to do with finance, but your finance colleagues are drug in. And it's good that they have a role, but it can be, you know, it may be the whole of the project in some cases, and it could be things like, oh, a new customer management system or a new website or anything like that, because the finance person is seen as a safe pair of hands. Fantastic.
Grace just said in the chat, actually, Alan, that
yes,
she's finding herself in this business analyst role because no one else is doing it, and that's exactly what happens. Is people are brought into the project and they're having to pick up things that, you know, no one else is doing. So I think that's really common experience.
Yes, we have a whole module here on how to get the best out of requirements gathering and business analysis. But yes, it's finding someone who's never done this before and making them responsible for it in any role is always a little unfair. Okay, so then let's talk about the financial management of your project. And we our model is that it should start with the project justification, sometimes called the business case, sometimes called other things, but it's a vital thing not to skip on your project. So the first question that the organization should be asking, and maybe they'll be asking you as the finance person on the project, is the project worth doing? So that will mean looking at the project as a whole and say, is the cost of doing this project greater than the benefits of doing this project? And that's what needs to get expressed in a business case. So you're comparing all of the resources required, all of the money, the risk of the project, and then comparing that, of course, to the benefit of it. And then the business case essentially becomes a decision support document to get everyone on the same page. Now, a large part of the business case is going to be your return on investment. And one of the things I think it's really important for people to understand is that whilst the return on investment case in a business case will be, all right, if it's a promise essentially in the business case, if we invest this amount of money, we will then get these kind of benefits, these kind of returns. And of course, once you've made that promise, if the business case is approved and the project goes ahead, then you're on the hook. You are the person who then has to make that a reality on the ground. But the other thing that's very much worth mentioning is that a lot of return on investment benefits from a project are not monetary. If it were all monetary, it'd be very easy. You would just put two columns in a spreadsheet and the spreadsheet would make the decision for you, because if that number is greater than that number, job done. But very often the benefits and ROI of a project are things like our customers can't find anything on our website, so they'll be happier if we revamp that thing. Our staff don't have good access to data, so they're wasting a lot of time doing things that they shouldn't be doing. There's lots of manual processes around here. We have staff turnover because people are frustrated that they can't do their jobs properly. So you can put clear declarative benefit statements in your ROI. But I think it's really important to recognize that they don't always have to be monetary. They don't always have to be number-based, but they should absolutely be within your business case to justify a project. And you're asking for a little bit more vision then than simply comparing two values in two columns. Okay, so then we go through the questions the business case needs to answer. And these are things that anyone would need to answer in order to make a decision on a project. So essentially, what are the benefits? What are the risks? And what are the implications of the project on the ground if it does indeed get approved? So giving people everything they need to know in order to approve a project. And a large part of it is making sure that you're getting people aligned and joined up on the business case, so that when you do go ahead, people aren't saying, oh, I wasn't consulted, nothing to do with me, I'm not going to support this project. That whole people side of it we find to be extremely important, and we find that it's best to do it by iteratively presenting your business case. If you're responsible for getting it through and approved, iteratively presenting it to people, or just informally meeting with people to say, does this reflect what you want to do? Have I forgotten anything? If we did this, would it work for your team? And then weaving their feedback into the document before you finally seek approval. So Chelsea, let me just bring you back in if you don't mind. I know you're the veteran of multiple business cases where you're seeking to get an organization, whether the ACCA or previous projects you've been involved in, where you're seeking to get the organization to approve what they're always going to think of as a large sum of money to execute what might be a big program of change. We've got these elements that need to be within the business case, but could I just ask you what you have found makes the big difference in terms of it going well or going less well to get an organization agreed on that kind of spend and how to go ahead with it?
Yeah, I think it's really important to do your research at this stage. The more effort you can put in here is absolutely going to save you time, and errors later down the line show that you've got this thorough business case. You've been absolutely clear on what problem it is you're trying to solve. And I say that because often you think, right, we need a new piece of technology. Let's put a business case that says we need to go and buy X. Actually, your business case really needs to focus on what's the problem you're trying to solve, and therefore what are the solutions to that problem, rather than being a predetermined outcome or way forward. So I would say, ask yourself that very basic question: what we're trying to solve here, what we're trying to fix, what are we trying to improve, before you move into that, and how are we going to do that? Don't see the shiny product or piece of technology and think, well, we want that. Go back to that original question. Be really clear on what is part of this project, that project scope, so that if things do start to creep later on, you can return to your business case and say, actually, maybe that's part 2, maybe that's a different project. Let's be clear on what's in this part of the process. I think that project scope is really important to have those defined boundaries, so that things don't creep and the costs don't creep, etc.
That's really good advice. So being really clear about the project, what the project will do and what it won't do, with the exclusions and scope are really important. One thing I found, I don't know if you've seen this as well, is that sometimes there can be too much of an emphasis on the technology. And so I know our whole thing is technology projects and how to make them work and so on. But in order to get something approved and agreed, and people seeing why you should do it, I found it's much more helpful to focus on the organization's goals than the technology. So the technology becomes just a detail, essentially. It's just a tool that you're going to use to achieve the goals. But the focus should be on, here's what we're trying to achieve as an organization. This is how this will help us, or this is why we can't do it right now because of these problems, and link it to those higher level elements. Do you find as well that there can be a little bit too much of an emphasis on the tech?
I think it's, especially I think of our members, they'll be going to maybe trade shows and things like that, and you are bombarded with the latest technology that is going to solve all of your problems, and it's really easy to be swayed by an amazing demonstration and think, yes, we need to get that. But like you say, if you look at what your organization's goals are and the problem we're trying to solve, and really be clear on that before you start looking at the tech, that will help you narrow down those options.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks so much for that. All right. So let's look at managing your costs and resources. First of all, we always begin at the beginning with how to start planning your project. And this is where either if you're the project manager or if you're the finance person on the project with responsible for scope and costs and so on. You'll then be required to start planning, and the planning involves your resources and when things are going to happen. But when things are going to happen has a huge financial implication. So if you're responsible for creating the project plan, you're obviously identifying when work is going to happen, when suppliers are going to do things, when you're going to be doing things. And of course, this has to be done in collaboration with the supplier's project plan. But then all of this has a finance implication. All of it has a cash flow implication that needs to be kept up to date and kept live, because you'll be expected to be on top of that. And by the way, if the cash flow on a project starts moving in unpredictable ways, that can be a really good early indicator that something's going wrong with your understanding of what the supplier is going to do for you. If they bill 90% of something in the first month that you were expecting to take over 10 months, something has been misunderstood, and it might be that the cost of the thing is not the cost of the thing. So these are early warning signs. So managing all of this in your project plan and the cash flow will keep you protected from being surprised on all of those things. There are key project documents that we provide as part of the course. So essentially, these are things that shouldn't be seen as a headache and an overhead. They're actually things that, if you just have the discipline of keeping them up to date, will stop you being surprised on your own project, will stop you with people saying, oh, this has just happened and you weren't expecting it, or what's happening with that, when is all of that going to happen? You'll be on top. You're always looking a month or two ahead on your project. So looking at these documents and seeing how they are essentially your friend rather than an overhead is a big part of having a successful project. So let's just look at 3 of them now. The project initiation document we find to be extremely important. There's a really elaborate and supportive template within the course itself for that reason. And it is essentially your way of making sure everyone agrees and is signed off on what the project is going to do, who's going to do what, when is it going to happen, what is definitely not going to be included in this project, agreeing things like the governance, who's going to sign off on decisions, what the reporting is going to look like. So it's a foundation that's going to stop people being surprised on the project. The project plan itself, we just talked about that. The RAID log is risks, actions, issues, decisions. It's amazing how often people will ask you something, particularly as a finance person and the project manager on a project, to say, oh, can we have that added to the project, or can we not do that, or can that be delayed for 6 months for this reason because we've got an audit or the annual conference. And then they'll forget they asked. And then when somebody comes to you later and says, oh, why is this project late? Why is it costing more? Why are these things happening? Your RAID log is where you've logged all of these decisions, where you've logged these changes to the project and got people to sign off on it, is your cover, is your explanation of why this is now later or longer or whatever it is. So the other element that we need to talk about is the main challenge on any project is always the people side of the project itself. So what often gets forgotten is that, okay, we're going to be changing technology A to technology B, or introducing technology B for the first time ever in the organization. And there needs to be a recognition that the only benefit that comes from technology changes is the degree to which it allows people to change, the degree to which it allows your colleagues to streamline their work, or your external stakeholders to do things with you that they weren't able to do before. So actually getting people to adopt the technology is the most important thing. And if you fail to do that, then nothing else is going to work on the project. So the Get Savvy course has a 6-phase change management methodology, which essentially, we haven't got time to do the whole thing today. We'll send you these slides after. But the reason we have a whole kind of change management module within the course, and then change management is part of every other module, is because knowing how to get the best out of the people, all of the moaners and the wreckers and your management team who will, not support you properly, and all of those kind of scenarios that happen all the time in the real world, is probably the biggest variable, the biggest dependency on your project success. So we always start with the management team, making sure that they're clear on their role in supporting you, and they're clear on the goals and clear on their role in helping you resolve issues if people aren't putting the time into the project that you need them to. And then there's a whole series of steps around making sure everyone knows what they're doing across the organization, making sure that people are consulted, that they have channels to give you feedback, that they have opportunities to engage with the project all of the way through, not just at go live. And then how do you then transition it into business as usual? That whole people side and change management we find to be the most important part of the project. And Chelsea, if you don't mind, so there are the 6 steps of the change management process. And again, we're sending it to people. I'll just go through really briefly and just pick this one here, which is your communications plan and keeping people informed about the project. Our model is that it's very much not a one-way process. If you're just sending out an email about the project every 2 weeks, you should recognize nobody is reading your emails. Can I just ask you, in terms of getting wider colleagues on board with a project and having, getting ahead of objections and getting the best out of people on the project, what have you found works on that? And essentially, how big an element of projects that you've been has that consumed? How much of the resources that consumed?
This is a perfect timing, as there's just a conversation going on in the chat about gaining buy-in, really, especially from those who maybe don't immediately benefit from the project, and why should they do that? I would say, again, the effort here is crucial. Getting the people on board will maybe make or break your project, because if people aren't engaging with it, saying they don't understand it or they weren't consulted on it, they will completely disengage, they will become detractors from the project, and it will just make your job so much more difficult. So first of all, you obviously need to get your senior management behind it, because at the very least, they will be controlling the purse strings, and they
Yes.
will be able to say to any of those really difficult team members, if it gets to that point, you just need to do as you're told and get on board with this. So you need the
Yes.
backing of the senior management team. You obviously need the backing of the team that is going to impact. They need to be communicated with throughout the project. You need to understand their needs, their requirements, keep them informed of what's going on. But then there's parts of the wider organisation who are maybe experiencing the change, but not necessarily understanding immediately how that benefits them. And what I would say is, if you think of your own organisations, you can probably pick out 1, 2, 3, hopefully not too many individuals who have a lot of influence and may be known as being more likely to detract from a project. I'd say grab them early on, get them involved, give them a role, even if it's some sort of communication liaison, so that they feel involved, that you're talking to them the benefits, you can get them on board, and hopefully you can start to overcome their objections before they're talking to the rest of the team about, why this isn't going to work and all the rest of it. So identify those key influences in your organization that you are going to need to keep close to this to make sure it's a success.
Great. That's really, really good advice. And I couldn't agree more in terms of the emphasis on the people side of the project, because just to be clear, what happens on so many organization-wide projects, I'm not necessarily talking about something where you're changing the finance system. So you might have a relatively small finance team and they have no choice, they have to use it, etc. I'm talking about things where it might be the CRM system, the customer management system, something where people could work around it or may not engage with it quite as much, or certainly a wider audience. And what we see all of the time on those kind of projects is that people are asked, what are your requirements in month 1? Then most staff are just completely ignored for the next 6 months, 9 months, a year, whenever, and into all of the time it takes to buy the system, deploy the system, test the system, and try and go live with it. Most staff are just kind of not involved at all and ignored, apart maybe from the monthly email, which they don't read. And then they're expected to have a little bit of training and then go live. And the go live then turns into a disaster of negativity, complaints, people not understanding how to use the system properly, presuming they don't understand their new business processes, etc. And if you don't want to have that happen, because it happens so often, the only alternative to it is to involve people all of the way through the project. And then the challenge becomes, how do you involve people? People are busy. They don't want, you're the one with project in your title. Surely you can just get on with it. So Chelsea, in terms of how you can get people involved in the project all of the way through, despite them being busy, I've found some things to do that work in terms of just attending their team meetings anyway, to give them a bit of an update. Things like a show and tell of the software is developing and the system's developing and how it's going to work for them. Trying to emphasize how it's going to benefit their team, and giving people early exposure to the systems. Have you tried any of those things? Have you found any of those things to work well or less well? Because you're trying to get to people who really would rather you go away sometimes, but you're trying also to make sure you don't have a disastrous go live when it comes around.
Yeah, I think it's right. It's about, what meetings are already in existence, so that you're not adding to anybody's workload, that you can steal 10 minutes from to go along and update people on what's going on. Because not everything related to the project and the meetings needs to be. Sorry, I think someone's just come off mute. If I could just remind everybody to mute.
It's no disrespect whatever you're the last person I'll actually do that to. I want to say again, thank you so much for checking.
Mildred, I think that's you. Would you just mind muting? Sorry, everybody.
Great, thanks so much. Sorry, Chelsea, you were just saying.
I was just saying, not every meeting needs to be a dedicated 2-hour project meeting. You can make use of, 10 minutes on the agenda of somebody else's meeting. Keep it light, keep it headlines. It's just that drip feeding of communication.
Absolutely. And we find the whole principle of two-way communication. Often there's a lot of anxiety around a project. When you're talking about streamlining, automation, workflow, self-service online, now we're talking about AI tools, creating content and responding to customers automatically. Some of your colleagues are hearing P45. You know, they're hearing, oh, you won't have a job anymore. So part of that, those meetings, and part of those benefits, and part of that engaging with the senior management team can be, how do we provide reassurance to people around that, so that it can help get people on board. So you know, how do you make sure that people feel like it's going to work for them as within their own teams? So could you mind if I just ask you, this whole thing about transitioning into business as usual is a very contentious area, because essentially we're asking people, yes, to learn a new system, but also very often, because the systems are different, you know, people are doing more stuff online, for instance, or you might have used the project to bring together two teams that were separate before, etc. Business processes are changing a lot. Have you found it difficult on projects to persuade the management team sometimes that we need to do this in a proper way, resource it, we need to, you know, devote proper time, take people away from their day jobs? Or have you found that, you know, the management team are generally understanding and supportive of that in your experience, Chelsea?
Experience, to be honest, Alan. I think sometimes, depending on who's in the management team and their own backgrounds and experience, you can have this dream team that totally get that you need to resource this properly. I've also had the experience of going through a management team who probably didn't support that initially. Project failure, just didn't deliver, a lot of time, money spent, and was not able to get what we needed from that project. And it's amazing how one failure quickly gets everybody on board for the next time round, and learning very quickly from those mistakes. So my advice would be, don't let your management team have that failure. Really explain to them from the beginning why it's important that, you know, if you're going to do something, do it properly, really.
Yes, yeah, and actually, sometimes you do have to paint that picture of if you've ever had a bad go live, and you can't have done too many projects without having a bad go live at some point in your experience, then you will never do it again. You know, the where you've, you know, made a decision to go live, and then everyone's complaining and nothing's working, and you might even have to unwind the go live. So sometimes it does help to paint a bit of a picture okay, here's what we're going to avoid, and this is how we're going to avoid it, by making sure that everyone's completely comfortable with the system, and, you know, the fact that they're going to have a whole bunch of members or customers phoning them up, and they won't know what to do. Here's how we're going to make sure that all of these things go well. Great, thank you so much, Chelsea. So what I'd like to do is just go through a quick run through of the course itself. I'm just going to go lightning fast, and then I'd like to start going through. And please do carry on dropping your Q&A questions in of things that are that relate to you and your own project. So first of all, you jump to our website, and then you buy the course, or if you've already bought it, you just sign in. Then let me just go and sign in here. Once you've signed in as a learner on the course, on the learning platform, it takes you to your personal dashboard, and you get a panel for every course that you're doing at the moment. At the moment, I'm doing managing technology change projects. I can see I've finished all the modules, but I like to go and do the modules again. So here is the list of the modules within this course. And in this case, it takes you through, as we've said, every module, every phase of your own business project. I'll just dive into the supplier selection module. Within every module, it then introduces the topic of how do you run a tender and get a supplier on board and make sure there are no misunderstandings. So the first thing it does is it introduces you to your AI-driven trainers within the module. These are people who will speak to you and guide you through what happens, what you must get right. Then, of course, it introduces you to the overall project pathway, and then where you are within that. In this case, it's the selection process. So then, what you do from there is, if I just carry on from there, and then finish the guide. From the supplier selection module, it gives you every module will give you your learning outcomes. Here is what you're at the end of this module. You'll have these areas of knowledge, and you'll understand how to do this. And again, within every module, it gives you your project brief. It's a bit like Mission Impossible. Here's what you're going to be able to do. Here's what you must achieve. Here are your stakeholders that you must satisfy as part of the project, which be the finance director, the operations director, etc. They will speak to you during the module to tell you what they want. And then, of course, within every module, there are project templates. So because you're going to be comparing suppliers, there's a scorecard, there's a comparison matrix. How do you do references, supplier feedback forms? These are all things that you can download and use immediately on your own project. And then it starts guiding you through the content. And we have this whole methodology for supplier selection that it guides you through 5 steps, what you must do and must get right at each one, what you have as part of that. And then as part of every module, there's also lots of checking your understanding, making sure that you've got the content, you've absorbed it. So if I do question 1 here, then which of the following, how do you organize your internal colleagues within a selection process to get the best out of them? I'll just answer on here, press submit. I've got that wrong, unfortunately, but it tells me where I've got it wrong and what I need to know. Then if I do question 2, then of course I can drag and drop these areas here. Let's do that quickly and put it into the right order so that I'm selecting the phases. And if I submit that, unfortunately, I got it wrong again. I need to take my own course again. And then as you go through, it's showing the questions you've got right and the questions you've got wrong. And then eventually it tells you how you've performed within this module. But I can retake it or I can continue from there. When you finish the modules, what you get then is your assessment. And if you pass the assessment, you get a fully accredited qualification. So let me just go jumping into the assessment and I'll start it. There are examples of yes and no questions, multiple choice questions, scenario-based questions, missing word questions, all sorts of things that make it interesting and engagement to do. And then at the end, in this case, I passed the course. So I actually am in a position where I've now got an accredited qualification in project management, which will look great on my CV or in my appraisal. The course is accredited by the Institute of Leadership and the International Association for Project Managers and CPD UK. So it's proper stuff. It's got your own digital verification link on there. And once you've got that in place, you're then able to wave it around, add it to your personal profile. Okay, so that really takes us back into the webinar. And then, Chelsea, do you mind if I just ask you again? Well, first of all, let's just go through some Q&A questions. I'd like to revisit some of the questions that we that we had. But are there any in particular that you want to pick out from the chat on the Q&A?
There's been a lot of chat around gaining buy-in and how difficult that can be to do, and how if the project doesn't immediately benefit someone, I mean, not necessarily the project, the end result, if the end result doesn't benefit that person, then they don't engage with what's been delivered. And how do you overcome that? And we've talked about, at what point do you actually have to get a line manager involved and say to people, come on, you need to get on board with this now. But I'd also look at sort of the wider organizational values that you have. Most organizations will have values around, working together and being supportive and, generally being a decent colleague to work with. So you would hope that, some of that would come through and people would get on board. But I don't know if you've got any more to say on buy-in, Alan.
A lot. I'm delighted there are lots of questions about that, because it is one of the toughest challenges. So we have this whole thing of, don't be the Lone Ranger when you're running a project. Don't try and do it by yourself. Don't try and, push it all along with just you and the supplier, because if you do that, you'll end up failing, and it'll all be on you. So in terms of buy-in, there is definitely a kind of carrot and stick element. That you mentioned, Chelsea, already, the leadership team. And that's why we always say start with the leadership team, because you need to recognize that as the project manager or the finance person on the project, you're not everyone's boss. You cannot compel people to give you their time. You can't, give them a bad appraisal if they don't. So you need to understand that part of running a successful organizational change is you need to borrow the authority of the senior management team. So starting with the senior management team and saying, look, here is where I need your support on this project. I'm going to facilitate the project. I'm going to manage all of these things. I'm going to, make sure that we always know what's going on. And I'm always going to be looking ahead, but I can't boss people around. So I need you, please, to issue this message to the wider organization saying, this is a very important project. We expect everyone to support Alan as he goes around asking for your time. And that needs to filter down through, the middle management group. So saying how important the project is, saying in nice language, you are expected to support the project because it's vital for our organizational success. And when Alan comes around asking for your time, you can negotiate about when, but you can't negotiate about if. You will put in your time. And then also a suggestion that you must live up to, which is that if there is a problem, it will get escalated, and then we'll come and talk to you about having to make it work. Without that that whole management team support, if there is a significant issue, then of course you've got nowhere to go. That's taking the slightly negative side, but it needs to be there. But the positive side of that is that whole, this is very important to the organization. There are all of these benefits to it. And this is why we need you to get involved and give your time to the project. So Chelsea, people don't like giving negative messages, and I understand that. But have you found that kind of getting the management team involved has ever been necessary on any of the projects you've been involved in?
Yeah, luckily not too often. But when I've delivered projects, we've sort of had two levels, if you like, of who's running the projects. You'll have those people involved in the nitty gritty, the day to day. They're meeting on a regular basis, and then we'll have sort of a higher level oversight that will include as many senior managers as is appropriate. And so on a semi-regular basis, we are going back to that group. And as part of sort of that risk identification that you do at the beginning, not having buy-in or having sort of disruptive people might have been identified as a risk. And so you'll be keeping them appraised of what's going on, what are the issues, and you're hoping that having them part of that more kind of higher view project management team, that it doesn't feel like you're as a one-off running along and going to tell on something. You're bringing it up as part of reporting back on the success of the project. You're saying, these are where we're having issues, this is where I'm flagging it, and they should naturally be saying, so how can we support? What do you need from us as senior managers to help unblock some of these blockers?
Yes, and also more positively, so yes, thank you for that. It's only a kind of if necessary, but more positively on the engagement question and the buy-in question, what we find the most effective thing you can do is meet people where they live, just in really simple terms. So don't just send out the email, as I've said a couple of times, but make it as easy as possible for people to be involved in the project. So yes, attend their team meetings, and just beg for 10 minutes at the meeting to tell people what's going on. Let people know it is coming. You are going to have to change the way you work, and you might as well learn and get ahead of it rather than be surprised by it later. And then make the software available to people. Sandpit is always very good. Offer people training, lunch and learn, drop in and get involved kind of thing. But also offer people a way of basically asking you questions, making it as easy that there's a channel that they can raise questions. And the contract is always, if you ask a question, we will always respond to it. We will always answer it, because that can be your safety net. You might have forgotten something. There might be a problem on the project, and the people who are doing the job are the best people to help you find that, as well as the people that you must get them to change how they work anyway, or else your project won't succeed. Great, Chelsea, on the buy-in, we can. I know there's more questions about that, or do you want to tackle a different Q&A question as well?
There was something else about the value of having somebody independent come in to help support some of these conversations, to help support the project. So just any thoughts you want to share on, if you're maybe embedding a new technology project, you will undoubtedly be working with the people who run that technology. How much involvement should they be having in talking to teams?
And just to declare, we are a little bit biased here because we are independent advisors on projects. So yes, I would say independent advice can really help you avoid issues and steer you in the right direction. I think an awful lot of organizations do manage it in-house, and having the course and a bit of support and training for people is a big part of that. What I find most commonly is that some independent help from somebody who's done this kind of project before or has helped other organizations through this, that's not just the supplier. The most likely point where that will be helpful is right at the beginning, where you're trying to agree, what is it we're going to do? How much should we be spending on it? How, what solutions or software should we be selecting? How should we establish our organization for success? Those initial weeks or months on the project are where you're setting your foundations and making the really big decisions. And then part of that can be equipping yourself as an organization, so you don't need ongoing independent help. In some cases, particularly for larger projects, you'll continue to have extra resource over and above your staff because there's just too much work to do in addition to the day job to make that work. So if you are able to get independent help, do take advantage of that. You're not typically measured on doing the project by yourself. You're measured on having the project work well. So don't think you have to do it by yourself in order to have a successful project. Getting the right level of help will just be appreciated by your organization, and certainly much better than having an issue because you've never done it before. So Chelsea, I know from your projects you've worked in different models where you've had independent help at the beginning, you've had added project managers all of the way through, and I guess that you might have worked on projects where the internal team are expected to take on everything. What have you found to be workable and pragmatic?
I think that the anecdote I always go back to is I was working in an organisation where the IT department were busy building a whole new CRM because they were IT and they could build things. And I went along to a talk not dissimilar to this about projects and particularly technology projects. And I think one of the first things was said was, don't let your in-house IT team go and build your CRM system. And my heart sank thinking, oh, that's exactly what's going on.
Yes.
And actually it was about understanding that problem you need to solve it, and just having that independent voice at the beginning to ask the right questions of the organization in a completely non-biased way to try and say, what is it you're solving here? What is it you're trying to get to? Why have you involved the IT team? Is that really there? And so for me, that independent sounding board, that independent challenge was really, really helpful at the very beginning of the project to really understand what the aims were, what the goals were, and get to the bottom of it, and then figure out the best way of doing that. So I'm a big advocate for that independent advice, because you don't know what you don't know. So the risk sometimes of building something internally is you've only got those internal reference points, and actually there's a whole load of solutions, technology, processes out there, and sometimes it's just great to have that. And you can use that just at the start of the project, and then you can get on with it. You might find it's useful and you want to keep that as a voice throughout the project. There's different ways of doing it, but I definitely found it very useful.
Fantastic. And one of the things that's just a truism is that the management team will often take advice and guidance from someone external over and above what they will from someone internal. So you make the very good point that internally, of course, you don't have exposure to all of the projects. You don't have exposure to what other organizations are doing and what's worked well and what's not worked well elsewhere. But actually, very often, they just need to hear from outside, this is the going rate, this is the proper amount of money that you need to spend, and you do need to resource this in this way. Don't try and do it on the cheap and so on. So even though you might be saying the same things, you can just get that support, that validation for the key messages in order to establish you for a project. And maybe I'm a little bit oversensitive to this, because I've seen a lot of people who have been pushed into this position, not supported particularly well by their senior management team, and then find themselves in quite an exposed position as part of the project. So all of these steps of getting the senior management team involved early, understanding that they can't just give it to you and put their fingers in their ears and run off. They have an ongoing role, or else the project will fail. And that when there are issues, you're going to bring it to them to solve it jointly. You can't say just because you are the project manager, it's your job to solve all of the problems. Absolutely, it's your job to bring the problems to the management team and discuss it. It's not your job to go and boss people around, because you don't have the authority to do that. So that crucial bit of advice and independent help early on can make the difference between you having an awful project where you're on the hook for everything, or a more successful project. Great. Maybe one more Q&A question, if there is one, but then I've got the quick fire round. I just want to go through with you, Chelsea, if you don't mind.
There was just a very quick point about being at stage 2, 3 of a project and
Yes.
not necessarily knowing who the right people were to involve, not knowing who the experts and gurus were in the organisation. Now, I did say in the chat, probably slightly unhelpfully, that that's something you really need to do at the beginning of the project so that it doesn't cause problems later
Yes.
on. But Alan, finding yourself in that situation where you're kind of partway through the project and you don't know who the experts are, or you've not consulted somebody, what do you do at that point?
Well, yeah, I agree. It's saying, oh, if somebody says, how do I get over there? You say, oh, you can't start from here. Is a difficult position. But really, I think there's never a wrong time to go to your project stakeholders and say, and share the issue, share the problem. So one of the main things that project managers tend to do is think that they have to do everything themselves. They have to go and find this expert. They have to go and find this subject matter expert themselves. And it's categorically the most successful project managers just share everything, share every problem, come with solutions, come with exactly what they need, but discuss it. So yes, I would go back to your the organization itself. Say, oh, we're coming to a phase here where we would really benefit from this kind of input, or we are missing this kind of input and it's a risk on the project. Who could we involve, or where would we start trying to find these people? And of course, you've got to get there. You've got to free them up as well. You can't just kind of hijack them and say, oh, can I have hours of your time? So you're going to have to go through that process anyway. But it's never a bad time to share the problem. Never a bad time to say, here's why it's necessary on the project and how we'll avoid this problem or risk by doing this. And then as part of that group, whoever it might be, identify those people and get approval to consume their time. Great. Chelsea, I'm just going to ask you some quick fire questions in the last few minutes about what you found works well on projects and what doesn't. And then we'll wrap up. So that's not intended to be a picture of you. I don't know why. We like animals in our logos. I've always liked that one. So the quick fire. Let's ask this one. Thinking of your last technology project, what would you have done differently? If we kind of have a kind of 20-second answer to that, please.
I think you're always learning from projects. So I think if you always say, I'll do everything the same each time, that would be a lie. So you probably would do things differently. In terms of my last one, I think it's probably around the beginning of the project. I think there was some scope creep, and actually we could have more carefully held some boundaries and not been taken off in a particular direction.
Fantastic lesson learned. Thank you. Would you have spent more time preparing the team, preparing the organization for the change to come?
I think I'm at the point now where I put plenty into that preparation and getting everybody on board. And that's having learned from multiple projects. So now I think we're good on preparing. But if you're early on in projects, you can never over prepare.
Fantastic. Then was it difficult getting the business case signed off on the last one you were doing? So you're asking the organization, there's this huge sum of money to do this thing here. And somebody somewhere might say, can we not do that? Or can we make the old rubbish last a year longer so I don't have to spend that money? Did you have any of those kind of challenges?
Yeah, particularly on the last project we managed, big budget, had to really work hard to demonstrate the impact. It was not a cost benefit that I was trying to advocate for. It was around creating a sense of value, so it felt less tangible. So a lot of persuasion had to go into that, a lot of kind of evidence to try and show that this was going to work. So looking at past statistics, the risk of not doing something was probably what got that through.
Excellent. And that might have taken a round or two of we're
or
not
three,
sure.
maybe, Alan.
3 or 3. Excellent. All right. So the more of that you're doing early on, and more consultation and support, the less challenges or the better you can handle those challenges. Did you use or are you using, I don't know what stage you're at, an external project manager?
It really depends on the project for us. For the large scale tech projects, I think you always would, or you would at the very least have a dedicated role that says actually you've been taken away from your day to day and you're going to come and project manage this, because it can get very big and very time consuming very quickly. You don't want to pretend to anybody this is going to slot into their BAU. It won't.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you. And one of the most common causes of project overrun, budget increases, etc. The client just cannot resource the project properly, so the supplier is then ending up just guessing what they want, etc. Lots of waste. And then how did you prepare your staff for the extra work? We've talked about this a lot. We've talked about engagement, etc. But just some stuff on the ground that you did to get people to understand this is going to cost more time, and then to actually support that and do that?
You've got to be honest up front. If you, like I just said, if you expect anybody to fold this into their day to day, they're going to quickly find it isn't. They're going to feel completely misled. So I think you need to be really clear from the outset that this is the time that's going to be required. This is why it's required. This is why it's so useful to have your input. And to make sure that you are allowing, however many hours throughout the week that you can account for people working on the project.
Fantastic. And then you can have those honest conversations with their manager and the senior management team if required, to say, if they can't do it, what are we going to do about this, etc. And then tackle it, collectively, rather than you being in a position where you have to beg or cajole or threaten to try and get somebody's time, which is never going to work. Okay, blockers with issues or lack of enthusiasm for the project. Just a yes, no on that one.
Always.
Always, and great. And then there's a slightly self-serving question here. So you and your colleagues had access to the course itself, Managing Technology Change Projects for Business People. Did it help to get people on the same page, to get people to understand what was required from them, and how the whole project would work?
And actually having the whole team see the same information, have access to the same templates, be able to follow the same process means it's just that shorthand. Everyone's got the same understanding. So it's massively helpful.
Fantastic. Thank you. And then segue here. So thank you very much for everybody. But just to remind you, as an ACCA member, you do get a discount on the course itself. And as I say, the most common feedback we get is, can we have it for our whole management team? So as an individual, the course costs £250 with the discount for a 6-month license. And then, of course, it's a lot less for management teams throughout. And then I'd just like to say thank you very much. Chelsea, thanks so much for your insight and your input. Thanks for attending, everybody. We'll provide the recording and the presentation. Take advantage of your discount. Get yourself some help. You need it for your project. You've earned it. Make sure you're not exposed. We'll provide the job aids and templates to help you on your own project, just as a thank you for attending the webinar. Don't forget about getting the qualifications from the course. That will help with your next job move or your next appraisal. They make a big difference. And then, of course, there's the CPD benefit as well. Then we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar, which is on the 10th of April. And we're talking about how you could help future-proof your own business or practice and deliver successful technology change, taking advantage of the newest tools and techniques and what everyone's trying to sell you around AI, where it makes a genuine difference to your own organization and how you can set yourself up for success. So Chelsea, thanks again to you, and thanks everybody for attending, and look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thanks all.